Okay.
No political.
We are now live, and it's going to take a couple of minutes to register how many people are watching. But for the moment, welcome, Maureen and Robert Huebel. Is that the correct way to pronounce that?
Yes, Huebel, it's Austrian. It's actually
okay.
Austrian name.
Yes.
Okay, that's an interesting name. So currently, Hung Tuar is here. Hung is always at my, whenever I do a live stream, he's always there and he says greetings. So what I'll do from time to time, I can do this and show your questions. So if anybody asks a question on there, then we can raise the question and get the answer to it. So this is your first time to do a live stream, is that right?
Yes, it is.
That's
right.
Okay.
Yes,
well, thank you very much.
I want to thank you.
You want to thank me? I'm thanking you. Okay. Fire away. I'll let you go.
That I'm not a bot. I'm actually alive.
Yeah. Well, I knew that. And which leads me nicely to, I'm going to go to the what I think is probably the second question first, because I want to get this out of the way. How well do we know each other? Because this has caused a bit of a shark feeding frenzy in media and on Twitter, that people are contacting me and saying, how well do you know this person? Apparently you're going to Xinjiang together with this person. And I said, well, this is the first I've heard about it. And I read about it, I think it was the Sydney Morning Herald or one of the Australian media groups. I read about the fact that I'm going traveling with you. It was quite a surprise to me. So there's my first question.
It was a surprise to me.
How well do we know each other, Maureen and Robert?
Well, we met through Twitter. Like I've met a lot of wonderful people through Twitter. I've been educated about China through a lot of people, some from the CPC, some from friends. But Twitter has been a wonderful tool for me to get an understanding and have videos and see people and see life in China before I've got there.
Mm-hmm. So you are planning, you haven't been to China as yet, have you?
No. My son has, and he's done it live on Facebook. And so I got to see quite a bit of it, but I've not actually been there. And I feel as if I've lived there, but I've not been there yet.
There's nothing like actually going there, and seeing it with your own eyes.
I think that's true. We all have preconceptions of China. It's a particularly, if this is a word, preconceptionable place. Everybody has their preconceived idea of what China is like. I know I did. I've actually made a video about my own views before I came here, what's changed and how they changed. What are your preconceptions?
Well, I guess because of Twitter and because of having very close Chinese friends, I see it as a country that's now growing to be quite wealthy middle class. And I know my friends have got plenty of money to come backwards and forwards to Australia, to go to private schools here. And so my impression of China is quite a positive one. And I know that it's not perfect. And I know that there's always changes, with any poverty alleviation program. When people leave a rural setting to a city setting, there is a huge adjustment. So I don't see it as perfect, but I see it as the poverty alleviation program is close to being miraculous.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. Miraculous is probably the word I would use. I'm putting out a video this evening called Is China Communist or Capitalist? And if you want to know the answer to that, you'll have to watch my video. There's a promotion. I'll just put in a word for my sponsor, if I had a sponsor. You started, when I first came across you on Twitter, you were obviously an unknown to me. We, as you say, we have never met. And I'll reiterate that as we go through this interview, this show, because I think a lot of people don't really understand this. They think we're good mates from Australia. But you started talking about Xinjiang in particular. What caused you to suddenly think there's something about this narrative that I either don't understand, don't like, or want to look deeper into? What caused you to do that?
Well, basically, first of all, I was watching the poverty grow in the West and in Australia too. homelessness, and people struggling to pay their mortgages, struggling to pay rent. And I could see poverty growing and homelessness growing. And I thought, well, this is the exact opposite of China. China's going from poverty to middle class wealth. What's China doing that we're not doing? And so I started looking to see who was doing the best in China, and Xinjiang was one of the ones that had the greatest GDP growth, as well as population growth. And so that's how I first became interested in Xinjiang. I later found out that some people were saying there was genocide going on there. I thought, well, if this is genocide, if this kind of GDP growth is genocide, we need some too.
Okay, that's one way of looking at genocide. We're going to talk about Adrian Zenz in a moment, but before we go into that, I'm going to tell you a comment that he made in a debate I saw him on about a month ago with Arnaud Bertrand, who is a French guy who used to live in China. And he said the reason for Xinjiang's GDP growth is because the CCP, as he likes to call it, has put so much revenue in there in order to create the symptoms of genocide. In other words, building prisons, building camps, these things, and pushing more security guards have generated the GDP growth that you're talking about. What would you say to someone who has that kind of theory?
Well, maybe it had partly to do with it, but I'd like to look more into it when I get there. But basically, a lot of people don't realize how much terrorism existed in Xinjiang. I know it finished in 2017, but there had to be strong security measures in order to combat this extreme terrorism and get it under control. And no doubt that, like everything else, would have contributed to its GDP. But if you look at the production of electricity and windmills and solar panels and a whole range of the farming has been improved, as I've been looking at some of the videos, and the houses, as you know well, they lived in mud huts in 2005, and by 2020 or 2022, they're living in comfortable houses. Now, this is something.
Let's just put that comment into a bit of perspective. I mentioned in fact, I think I called them mud hovels, not mud huts. Not all of Xinjiang lived in mud huts, but a lot of people did. Their homes were basically what we would term adobe homes. And some of them were hundreds, if not even thousands of years old. But inside the city, inside Harmi, Turpan, and Urumqi, the capital city, people lived in ordinary houses and apartment blocks. But once you got out of those cities and into the rural part, you did actually see people sleeping and living. A lot of people sleep outside during the summer because it's cooler, it's nicer. A lot of houses actually have beds outside them. It's rather strange to see this, but yeah, they were pretty much doing that. Now, you said you wanted to look at this from the perspective of population growth and GDP growth. You are an academic, and this has been questioned. Can you give us some background into, first of all, your own academic experience, and then why this and what happened to you when it got questioned?
Well, basically, my background is undergraduate accounting, and then I did a postgraduate in England, in Lancashire, in the Lancastrian University, the business school, which is a postgraduate, and I did a thesis there. The next qualification I did in Melbourne University in the Faculty of Law, where I did another postgraduate in dispute resolution. And I've done a lot of other courses. I've done research at Monash University in family law. So dispute resolution, family law, I've done a whole lot. I've published a lot of papers, all on an honorary basis. I've published for the Law Book Company in Australia, many publications. In fact, I was on the consultancy team as an editor. And I've also published for financial magazines and journals, of which the banks now use as their teaching material. So,
and what did Dr. Adrian Zenz call you?
a fake.
And went on further to call Maureen a nothing, because
nothing.
His poor research. His strongest research tool is Google, and it appears that you need to actually pay money to get a postgraduate information from the universities rather than have it.
So it's behind a paywall. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Victims of Communism Association, of which he is, I think he's a fellow, or maybe even the chair. Not sure. But the Victims of Communism Association don't have the funds to enter the paywall of a university to establish the credentials of the people that they are ridiculing.
Well, in actual fact, it was it was publicly available at Monash, but you had to know where to look, and
of course,
and he would have had to have paid to get the information from the Lancastrian School in the UK.
Right.
But
if it's any consolation, his own PhD is on Cambridge website. I had trouble finding it, but eventually it got pointed out to me. It is there. He does have a doctorate from Cambridge University, which I find incredibly disappointing because of the way that he does his research. And Maureen, you have a little more to add on that. His research seems to have some flaws. Would you agree?
Well, yes, certainly. As an international scholar, the first thing you do is you contribute to the body of knowledge, and that's your fundamental thing you're doing. The first thing you do is work out your methodology. You preliminary research, then a methodology. I publish my methodologies, and I will publish my methodology on this, because then you can get peer review from the methodology. Once you've settled the methodology and you think that that's sound and safe and workable, you can then proceed with it. You have to do field research. You can never add to the body of knowledge with Google. You have to go out there and see it and feel it and sense it. And Robbie and I have been into many war-torn countries in our life, and particularly Ukraine, Kiev, and on Honiara too, in the Solomon Islands. And when you go there, you can actually feel the fear in the air and between the people. And so going out there is no substitute for it. You have to do it. You cannot add to any body of knowledge without going out there and living it and feeling it.
And you asked him for his methodology. What happened then?
He blocked me.
I'm going to say this. He is a world famous academic now. He is world famous. He is an academic. Now, I do think there's a bit of an oxymoron there going on, but the world famous academic, when you asked for his terms of reference, what it was, he must have started with a hypothesis and then managed the methodology within that hypothesis. Then he says, no, I'm not going to give it to you.
Yeah,
what does that?
And then
what kind of academic does that?
You can't be an international scholar because basically you share your information, you share your field notes, you compare things, you try and together as a community, as a scholar, you try and add to the body of knowledge. So blocking someone or insulting them is not acting like an international scholar. No.
My understanding, and I remember this happening because you contacted me, we were in touch with each other. You opened a new Twitter account under the name Maureen Garwood, I think, or you were.
That was the first account, and
the first one, Maureen Garwood, was
blocked.
What happened to Maureen Garwood?
Well, basically, I keep that in my pocket, in my back pocket, because I never know when I'm going to be suspended. And when I was suspended without any reason or anything given to me. I couldn't get any response from Twitter at the time, or why I'd been suspended indefinitely. And so I found that very hard. So I thought, well, I'll keep another account in my back pocket in case they do that to me again. But now Elon Musk has taken over Twitter. I'm hoping that there will be a little bit of fairness going on.
You felt that. Sorry, Robert. Go on.
What happened was when he blocked, he asked him. He made some allegations against Maureen, and then as a result of that, she was cut off from Twitter. So she never had the opportunity of reply because Twitter had cut her off. So
do you think Adrian Zenz reported you? Do you know what happened there?
Oh, I did hear that a number of people have reported me, and even today I got Twitter informed me that the German government had asked for me to be suspended. But
this is a rule under German law. If someone in Germany wants you to be suspended, the German government requires Twitter to tell you. It's not the German government. It's a requirement under German law that if someone in Germany reports you, you need to be told that you've been reported and what for, which I think is not a bad idea.
I didn't mind it at all. And they said to me I hadn't broken any German law, I hadn't broken any Twitter rules, and therefore I was not going to be suspended again.
Right. Yeah. And that's probably what should happen every time. Now, if someone is just outright rude, they're using the F word and things like this, or even worse now, the N word, or being gender specific, then yeah, I get that they can suspend you immediately while it gets investigated. But have you ever been rude to anyone on Twitter? Is that the cause?
I don't think I've been rude. I certainly call a spade a spade.
But you don't call him a black spade.
No, I'm not racist at all. I haven't been rude. I've called a spade. I mean, I have been pretty tough on Peter Dunn, pretty tough on Scott Morrison. News Corp reported that I'd threatened him, Scott Morrison, physically, which was ridiculous, and then they withdrew that. But the News Corp report carried a lot of errors, including that you and I were going on this spree together.
Yeah, let's go on to that. How did that happen?
He made it up. It's just pure fabrication.
He made it up.
He makes it up. They take part of the truth and then they add to it, and they take away and they twist it. I must say I prefer to be interviewed by Chinese journalists.
You have to excuse me. I'm just getting some water.
Oh, sorry.
I should have prepared water. Yeah, we're getting it.
Okay. Thank you. I have been blunt. I'm very anti-war, and I have been blunt with people. I've been blunt with Penny Wong, and I've said, well, you've made comments about the Uyghurs. I'm studying it. I'm really interested in it. Can you support what you're saying about the Uyghurs?
Can anyone support it?
Nobody does. I keep asking, please give me some evidence. I'm happy for it. I'm not, I don't have to have it either way, but I just need to have evidence. And I find so many politicians make statements, and when you say, well, where's the evidence? How do you substantiate that? You get silence.
They'll refer you to one of three sources. Adrian Zenz is one of them. If they're not referring you to Adrian Zenz, it's ASPI. And if it's not ASPI, it's these witness statements. And you have to ask, where are these witnesses and how did they get there? That's my question. Where are they?
And have they got some practice? And have they had some bad experiences? I mean, every judicial system in the world makes mistakes. There are innocent people in jail everywhere. There are people on death row in America that are innocent. Nothing's perfect in the judicial
Exactly. Somebody has just made it. I'm getting a couple of comments like this. Xinjiang is home to the most beautiful women. That wasn't the one I wanted to show, but that is true. Look at Dilraba. She is one of China's most beautiful women and one of China's most prolific stars, and she is a Uyghur. It is rich in resources. This is part of the reason that there is a problem there. I don't think...
And I think that part of the reason why the US is pushing to create a bit of a kerfuffle in Xinjiang is because of the resources, but it's because it's also the gateway to Europe for the Belt and Road. And
Yes.
if you look back in history, it's the old Silk Road. And
it is
Belt
indeed.
and Road is really just the reincarnation with modern technology of the old Silk Road. It was very efficient.
It used to take a year to get across there. Now it takes 10 days to get a train from the east coast of China to Poland. And that's a fact. Now, of course, the trains they're much more efficient in terms of how fast and how reliable they are compared to ships, but they don't take anywhere near as many containers. So they're slower in that respect. So the efficiency of the ship is greater still. And what America can do is it can block the entire South China Sea, the Western forces, if they choose to, but they can't block. And this is why they want to control Xinjiang, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've seen some research done that has shown that when they opened that train route, and was it back in 2004? I'm not sure exactly when.
I caught the train there in 2000. I think it was 2005. It might have been 2006. I caught the train there with my father, who was in his late 70s, and we caught the train from Guangzhou all the way to Xi'an, where we stopped for a day or two. And then from Xi'an, we went on to Xinjiang. It was a 56-hour train journey in those days. The high-speed train has only been open a few years. It's much more recent. Now I think it's about 8 or 12 hours from Beijing or the East Coast to Urumqi. And you can go high-speed train in different parts of Xinjiang. Xinjiang is huge. A lot of people don't realize how big it is. Xinjiang is as big as France and Germany combined, and then some. It also borders onto, I think, 17 different countries or 14 different countries. I think China has 17. Xinjiang has most of them. And one of those countries, amazingly, is Afghanistan. It has a very small border with Afghanistan. And I think a lot of people don't know that, especially in America. They have no idea of the geography of this. And this is the reason.
The American military are very aware that Xinjiang is next to Afghanistan.
Well, the American military are, yes. Yeah, I think the American people are not. No. I actually had a discussion the other day with someone who said to me that on Twitter, who said to me that Hainan Island was Taiwan. And he said, no wonder Taiwan has so many problems. It's so close to Vietnam. Taiwan's nowhere near Vietnam. But Hainan is. And they've got the wrong picture. I also believe in Australia, a lot of people think that China is ready to attack Taiwan and then roll straight over and attack Australia because it's like next door. They have no idea that it's only 100 miles off the coast of China.
Thousands of miles away.
It is.
Yes,
it's 10 hours flying time.
Yes.
But you've got to realize that they paint Taiwan as if Taiwan is a separate country and it has a separate sovereignty. It never belonged to China. It was never invaded by the Japanese. It's always been an independent country, when in fact it hasn't. I mean, history says it belongs to the dynasties.
If we go back in history, it's changed hands many times. It belonged to the Dutch once.
Yes,
I think the Portuguese too. Yeah, it was Formosa for a while, and that's not the beginning. It was Chinese before that. It's one of those things that it's so close to China, you can't dispute that it's Chinese. I mean, historically, geographically, it's China. Politically, I
haven't seen them, but I have read that there are some very ancient papers in China that talk about their relationship with Taiwan going back centuries. And that doesn't surprise me. I think the Chinese were probably fishing in the South China Sea before Australia was a country and before America was a country.
Long before, yes. Yeah. That's a fact. The South China Sea issues are a really interesting one. Maybe we shouldn't get on to the South China Seas. I wanted to ask you how you overcame your block. Now, we don't know if Zen's reported you, but it's quite likely that you were mass reported by followers or people who had an interest in getting you off. Why do you think they wanted you off?
Basically, if they did their homework, they'll see I've got a lot of published papers, and I've used very robust academic techniques to have them, and I've added to a lot of bodies of knowledge. And I think that they wanted to get rid of me. The other thing is I'm independent, and I'm financing things myself, or my husband and I are, because the first thing about being an independent scholar is you can't be financed by any government. And even today, I couldn't be financed through a university because there is so much controversy over this.
What happened with that? Why won't a university help you to establish the truth? Now, bear in mind that you're not coming here to prove Adrian Zen's wrong. You're coming here to prove he might be right. He could be wrong, but he could be right.
My principal and primary purpose is to look at poverty alleviation. Nobody's done it better than China. And we need that kind of help now. We've got people living on the streets. We've got people living in worse conditions than the Xinjiang people did in 2005 in the rural sector. They don't have any
interesting. It's interesting. China doesn't have homeless people. It's very, very rare to see a homeless person in China. And when you do see people living in the streets, they actually do have a home. They haven't gone there. They have a home. Everybody is household registered when they're born. They have a place of residence. And if somebody is homeless and begging in the streets, for example, in Zhongshan, where I live, the police will pick them up, put them on a train and send them home. And when they get home, they get picked up there and taken to where they should be. Now, they then might choose, because there's a better level of income being a beggar in the Greater Bay Area than there is being a farmer in rural Hunan or Sichuan. So they come here and do this. That's their choice, but they do have a home. Everybody has a home. So the homeless thing is very, very rare.
Well, it's becoming very common here. And we have a terrible system where the welfare system says, well, you've got no fixed address. We're not going to support you. You can't have a bank account. You've got to identify yourself. And so I see people that actually are begging to get enough food to eat for the day, let alone get enough money to have a bed to sleep in. And I'm thinking, we're a rich country. We've got to do better than this. There's got to be a better way. And of course, these people, they lose their spirit. You know, their spirits get broken. I was talking to an SAS soldier who's got injured in the Afghanistan war, living on the streets. And I've said to him, why can't the RSL help you, Return Services League? And he said, well, the conditions are so bad there that I'd rather be on the street, because they'll steal my money, they'll wake me up. And because everyone has this broken spirit, they could turn to drugs and alcohol. They didn't start off as alcoholics or drug addicts.
Jenny's just put this number. I don't know if this number is correct or not correct, but it's horrendous. That would be 10% of America.
That's 1 in 10, yeah.
That's amazing. But of course,
is that right, Robert? You've seen that before?
I think the number sounds a bit high.
But on the other hand, it's almost impossible to count homeless. And the reason it's impossible is that a lot of people couch surf. A lot of people live in garages. A lot of people live in their cars. And so they have their pride. They don't want to be registered homeless.
I think it may be 1%, not 10%. That's Anglo has come up and said not correct. I think it's more likely to be about 3 to 4 million people homeless. But you're right, it's almost impossible to count them. And that is the big problem. The other thing about poverty here, and poverty alleviation here did something fantastic. This is true. But nobody in this generation, nobody starves to death because they have farms. Most people who are in poverty are in rural areas. They're in poverty because the farms are not sustaining them. They're sustaining their life, but nothing more. So the sustenance living of this was quite common in Africa. Unless there was a war or a drought or some sort of famine caused by natural conditions, people don't starve because they grow their own food. but they're living on the same thing all the time. They're living on what they can produce. So that's poverty in China. And generally speaking, even my wife's mother has a vegetable patch. Everybody grows their own vegetables here, I think. And here's a good comment. China can house and feed over 1 billion people, and the US can't manage 300 million. Maybe due to the systems, do you think? Okay, let's go back to my questions. As you've told many people that you plan to visit Xinjiang, and I was really intrigued by what I saw when you put this on Twitter and the replies, some of the comments in the replies. Tell us a little about that. What was your expectation when you said to people, "I'm going to visit Xinjiang"?
Well, I expect people to criticize me from the West. I expect them to say I'm a Chinese shrill. Someone complimented me and said, "You are the most sophisticated Chinese propagandist I've ever met." You know,
Nice.
you're a shrill. You're a bot. You're so shameless. You know, but I take no notice of it. I mean, I look at a situation and think, well, is this going to add to the body of knowledge that we're trying to pursue here? And I think, well, let him have express himself, and I just block them if they're not going to add to the body of knowledge. It's very simple.
Why do you think people are afraid of you going to see? Because clearly they're afraid of you going there. They're afraid of what you will find out. Why do you think that would be?
I'm not affiliated with any government. I'm not paid for by any government. I'm doing this because I do believe in being honest, in being a scholar. I've been writing on an honorary basis for many, many years. And I think that's frightening because they can't say, "Oh, you're paid for by China, or you're paid for by the American government, or the Australian government for that matter." I have to not be influenced by any donors. And I think that's because I'm just seeking the truth, and I have no vested interest in the truth either way. That frightens people, particularly if the reports have come out when they've been biased.
What are they frightened? The issue. The issue you find when Big Tobacco was getting their researchers to do their work, it was quite clear that they were putting forward research that covered off on that area to make sure that their product is not carcinogenic, that's not causing illness. And we had hundreds and hundreds of reports saying it's not really that bad, you know. And
I remember that
sort of thing. And that's because it might be the American hierarchy, if you call it anything, like the NED, that could be funding certain things. So you just don't know whether to believe.
I have a theory. It's just a theory that the people who are angry with you are the people who have this vested interest in maintaining this myth. Now, I get this on a daily basis, but I'm very good with blocking people, and I'm happy to answer any critical question. But I'm not going to entertain the people who just call me a CCP propagandist, a paid shill, a wool mouth. I don't entertain them anymore. I used to try and respond to them, but it's just a waste of time. And so now I'm in a position where I don't get so many. And every time I do write an article, I link it to government statistics. I link it to facts. I link it to media. I link it to academic reports. And when I say something, no one can say that's a lie. Now, here's the thing. If you are visiting Xinjiang, even if you are paid by the government, if you tell the truth and you prove it's the truth, where's the lie? What's the problem? Why can't you do that? Or why can't I do that?
Well, I think in my case, I could not accept any money from China or anywhere else. I don't need it. Any money I could get for this, it's not worth it. We've established ourselves. and we live in a beautiful environment. I simply don't need the money, and so I'm not easily bored.
And there are two aspects to that. One is that you must be seen to be, and you must be.
Yes.
And just like an auditor, an auditor can't do certain things, and we feel much the same. We're both accountants, so we understand the concept.
Okay, so I mean, this Donat is often commenting on my videos. He has very, very wise comments, and this is a fact. They will probably say to you, "Yeah, I know you say you didn't get paid, but you must have got something for this, right?" And the answer is no, I didn't. I mean, I don't get paid for what I do. I'm talking to you completely free and gratis. My view is that I've been to Xinjiang, and I know that what I saw is not what I'm reading in the papers. Now, I'm not saying there aren't problems there. I'm saying what I saw is not what I'm reading. There is no genocide, blah, blah, blah. So I've got and of course, the first thing they say to me is, well, you can't have seen it all. True. That's true. I can't have seen it all. But I have cycled more than 5,000 kilometers inside of Xinjiang. So I've seen a lot. And people still think that I get paid for doing what I do because I tell the truth. I tell the truth about what I know and how I see it. Do you think that this might be a problem for you in the future?
Well, I'm lucky in the situation that I won't be accepting money. And people for a long time have said, "Oh, China is paying you to say what you say on Twitter. China is paying you." And I put in a picture where I had some a Yuan dynasty picture, and they said, "Oh, they're sending you very expensive antiques." It was a reproduction that my son had brought back from China. It wasn't
somewhere behind me, I've got a few things like that. I bought them all. One of them is a Tang Dynasty horse, and people say, "Is that a Tang Dynasty horse?" I wish. I wish. The vase is quite an expensive vase. It cost us a few thousand RMB, but I've got the receipts for it. I bought it because I was in a museum of ceramics. So yeah, we've got a few things. And this is a good point. Does the fact that you take money or not take money make a difference to people who hate China? What do you think?
Well, there's been so much indoctrination against China that I live in a society that essentially doesn't like China. They totally believe that President Xi Jinping is a dictator and a cruel dictator.
Yeah.
They haven't looked at his work and I've seen old footage of him in his 30s hiking through mountains to get to a village that was close to starvation, to see what he could do. And I suppose in his own way, he was one of the first cadres to see what he could do to lift up the spirits and lift up getting them out of poverty.
There's a very little known fact about Xi Jinping. Do you know who his father? You know who his father was?
No.
His father was. Everybody in China credits Deng Xiaoping with the opening of Shenzhen as a special economic zone. And I think at the time there were 5 special economic zones. Shenzhen is the biggest of them, and it borders Hong Kong, so obviously the most important. But that whole idea of the special economic zone was Xi Jinping's father's idea. Now, Deng Xiaoping was the president of China at the time, so he gets the credit for it. But the first governor or mayor, I'm not sure of his exact title, of Shenzhen as a special economic zone was Xi Jinping's father. So there's a lot of history there in the development of China and how China has opened to the world from Xi Jinping's family, not just him. So yeah, he is what they call a princeling. He's one of the princes. There's no doubt about that. But he's earned his stripes, in my opinion. He had several years digging ditches and working as a farmhand in rural China. Now, once you've done that, you've got 2 ways you can go. You can get out of it and leave them behind, or you can get out of it and try to help them. And it seems that's the path that he took.
Yeah, and he's helping other people too.
This was an interesting one. Did you see when Rishi Sunak, or what do they call him? Ravi. I can't remember what Joe Biden called him, but it wasn't Rishi Sunak. He got chauffeured to a homeless center, and he asked a guy, "Are you in business?" The guy said, "I'm homeless."
Yeah, well, we're actually starting a foundation, and it's been going a little while now, just to get all the paperwork sorted out. And the aims of this foundation is to provide accommodation and a community to support low-income people and people at risk of experiencing homelessness. So we believe that we've come up with a quite efficient model to assist people who need somewhere to call their place home, and to allow them to not have their spirit broken, because that's really the deciding point. Is if your spirit is broken, it's very hard to go out and sell yourself to get a job.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, from rock bottom, it's very hard to come back. That's an absolute truth. We have a fundraising organization here in Zhongshan in China. My wife and I, we're credited as being the founders of it, but basically it was because the people who are no longer here and were involved with us at the time it was founded, they've all gone, and we're left here as credited as being the founders of this. It's not a charity, it's a fundraising organization, and this is one of the reasons why we do our bike rides. My wife is extremely famous here because she walked from here. We're very close to the border of Macau, and she walked from here to Beijing to raise money for charity. That's a 4.5-month walk. So, and part of the reason that we did that was for disabled people. When I first came to China, you never saw any disabled. I won't say there were no disabled people. There were no disabled people in the communities. Now we're starting to see them coming around on their electric scooters, and we've got disabled ramps into many of the shopping centers and buildings, which didn't exist before. And it's turned around, and I'd like to think that we had something to do with that here in Zhongshan, but it's a global thing in China. When I say global, I mean all of China. And China now has the largest and best disabled sports training program. And my wife's going to be involved in the disabled games here in the city. The winners of those will go on to a provincial disabled games next year, and Paralympics. We've got a Paralympian here in Zhongshan, a couple actually, but one is a gold medalist, a Paralympian. And that's all part of the change that we've seen. So it starts small, and what you're doing, Robbie, there is starting small with this foundation. I hope that this will turn the corner, but your society needs to help. And in the case of China, it is. In the case of Australia, will it? It's a good question to put to you.
What you do is you look at world's best practice, and then you look at how that can be applied best to your situation, but in particularly in our situation in Australia. And once we've done that, we might be able to think about how we might even be able to improve it a bit. But who knows? But we certainly will learn a lot from what the Chinese have done. And I think part of the secret is that they've looked at how to harness the spirit of these people to get behind how they can live a better life.
Yeah, a lot of people who are critical of the Communist Party, a lot of people who are critical say, it's great that China lifted 800 million people out of abject poverty, but the fact is they lifted themselves out. The government didn't do it. And I would say wrong. First of all, the government had to put in the infrastructure. So if you want to be rich, you build a road. They've built roads. And that's actually an old Chinese saying. If you want riches to come in, first build the road. So they've built the roads. They've built the 4G and the 5G in the systems so that people in those rural areas can actually get out even online, getting out with their messages. And they've built the infrastructure for there's a massive express delivery program going on here in China. And that's the unsung hero of poverty alleviation. There's 4 or 5 delivery companies. You can have something, we've done this, from a street corner in Xinjiang, where we bought some melons straight from the melon farm. We've had them sent to Guangdong in 36 hours. We're talking 4,000 kilometers away. 36 hours later, Anne's parents were enjoying the melon that we enjoyed the day before. That's how fast it all is. It's fantastic how that does that. And you can't do that without government support. India can't do it. You're saying Indian people are lazy? No, Indian people are exactly like Chinese people. You give them the infrastructure and they will do it, but they haven't got the infrastructure yet. Hopefully that's changing and it will come. And I think that's the thing that people don't understand about China.
That's what I want to learn about. I want to talk to the cadres. I want to know how they lift the spirit of people, how they get teamwork, and how they create things. Because creating a welfare state, a welfare country, is not the total answer either.
No, it's not. Socialism, it works part. And this is what the video that I've just put out, is China capitalist or communist? Socialism is not the answer. True socialism is not the answer, because it does hold people back. But a blend of capitalism and socialism will work, and it is working. The train systems here are fantastic. So somebody says no Centrelink in China, and that's an interesting comment. But then the next comment, same person, but we do have an early pension system. Chinese ladies retire at 55, Chinese men retire at 60 currently. And now they have a social welfare pension, which they contribute to all the time they work. It's relatively newly developed. And it's not like when I worked in the UK in the 1970s and 80s, I can get a pension from that. If you worked here in the 70s, you can't. So that's an interesting thing. Now, I've got another question for you. I know that you're coming and doing your best not to have any preconceived notions. When you get to Xinjiang, what do you expect to find?
Well, I expect to see a lot of dancing. This is my expectation.
You will actually, yeah. To be honest, okay, it annoys me when that's all they show of Xinjiang, and people say to me, "Have you got any videos of Uyghurs dancing?" No, I don't want that. But yeah, you will see every evening. You'll see, but that's all over China. It's not just Uyghurs, but all over China, people dance every evening. You will see that. But Uyghurs do dance. It's part of their culture.
Yes, and I'm not expecting perfection, but I really want to see how the poverty alleviation worked, and I want to bring back that knowledge to Australia and say, well, what parts of this can we use? How can we adapt this? Because our system is not working. We're getting a heavyweight welfare system rather than looking at how can people contribute? How can people have the spirit and the teamwork to contribute? And that's what I want to look at, because I've been really touched by some of the videos I've seen by cadres that bring the team out of poverty. They become a close working team. They really are sad to see this man go, and there were tears in their eyes. And I thought, how beautiful what he'd achieved, this cadre. And I think that's what I want to meet. I want to meet the cadres. I want to see how they really do it.
From a distance, it looks like there's mentoring going on, that there's a parting of knowledge that these people may not have had that the cadres would have. And mentoring, particularly on a one-to-one basis, is a very effective way to transform an individual to do better. And that's really what seems to be at the heart of the cadre system.
Yes, you're talking about what I call the pairing system. What they do, Guangdong is a rich province. Guangxi is a poor province. They're neighboring. And what happens is Guangdong, by government edict, must help Guangxi. So cities in Guangdong help cities in Guangxi. But it also works inside the province. So, for example, Zhongshan, where I live, is a relatively rich city, but Heyuan in the mountains is not. So Zhongshan has to help Heyuan. So we raise funds here for various different things, and we take them to Guangxi or to Heyuan, and we'll disperse those funds. And this is how socialism really does work very well. And it works on a provincial basis, it works on a town basis, and inside of the town, it works on a local basis. And what you're talking about there, inside of these poverty areas, people will go to university from that area. They understand the culture of the area. They go off to university, and 4 or 5 years later, they come back with the skills needed to help their own region. And they get benefit for that. They get accelerated promotions and higher salaries. If they want to stay in the city, they can. There's no problem. They can stay in the city and earn good money. But if they come back and do what Xi Jinping did, for example, then they are recognized as contributing to society, and it's beneficial to them, but it's more so beneficial to the rest of society. And somebody made the point here, I've lost it now, this would work really well in Aboriginal communities in Australia. It needs people who understand those communities to rebuild those communities, in my opinion.
It does indeed. And that the first thing the foundation did was provide a weatherboard house to a family, an Aboriginal family. They had some land in the country, and they took the weatherboard house, they reconstructed it. And that was the very first small start to the foundation. But we have much bigger plans, and I'm hoping that I get government support. We have a very good premier in Victoria, and he's got compassion, and I'm hoping to approach him with the ideas I come back with.
Did you see this one? Guangdong paid for all the electric buses in Xinjiang. Why? Because Guangdong has BYD, who build all the electric buses, and BYD is one of Guangdong's biggest companies. So they donated. I mean, the Guangdong government would have paid for them. There would have been very low profit on those buses for BYD because they would have gone into the system. Now, what that does is it helps BYD, because now BYD did the right thing. I've got a friend here who worked for a construction company. He was chief financial officer, quite a wealthy guy, for this large construction company. In 2008, after the earthquake, his company immediately transferred 100 million RMB. They were a rich company. They transferred 100 million RMB into the fund. Guess what happened when that fund needed to be spent on rebuilding new schools, rebuilding new shopping centers? His company got that. So it does work. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that kind of you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. You can guarantee that any company that didn't donate is not working, or was not working in that region because they didn't donate. It's as simple as that. If you contribute, you get it back. It's quid pro quo. It's a very, very good system, in my opinion. So
I think so too.
This is a nice one. Very intelligent people talking.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is nice. Yeah. I think I've made a comment here. The other day when we had a little chat preparing for this, I said that this guy who had been arrested in Australia was in Silverwater prison. He's actually not. He's in Parklea prison. What do you think about that? This is a guy who came to China several times. He writes articles and he writes reports for people in China, but he's been arrested in Australia. What do you think about that?
Unfortunately, Australia is very good at detentions. We have a lot of refugees in detention. And I think that I think we should have a judicial system that looks a little closer to what actually he did do. I'm hoping that he has been through the judicial system, and has had an opportunity to clear his name.
Well, of course, that's what the legal system is all about. Believe it or not, they have a legal system here and a rule of law, and it's different to Australia. So therefore, Australia criticizes it. Once you get arrested here for something serious, you will be held incommunicado until the investigation is complete. And then the investigation is complete. You'll either be released without charge or you'll be taken to court and convicted. Usually they have a higher than 90% conviction rate because the investigations are so thorough. Everything is presented to the court. Here's the evidence. And they don't have the legal technicalities. They don't have a writ of habeas corpus here. It is different, and it's not a system I particularly like, but it is a system that works for China. People don't do very much wrong. The crime rate is very low. I want to just make a comment about this one. Other YouTube videos about China's real estate market collapsing. The answer is yes, I can share it, but now is not the time. We're talking about Maureen and Robert's trip to Xinjiang and the ramifications of that. So yeah, I'll think about that for another video in the future. It's not collapsing anyway. What it is going through a bit of turmoil, but it's not a collapse. There's one or two companies collapsed, but it's not as bad as the banking system. Okay, so it's the same across East Asian countries, somebody else has said. So basically, that's all I had to talk to you about. We're almost at an hour now. I wanted to talk to you about the Twitter issue, the Adrian Zenz issue, the academic freedom issue. There's one thing we didn't cover. Do you think that Australia currently has academic freedom?
No.
That's the short answer.
That's the short answer and the long answer.
That's both answers. The answer is no. And we both know the story of Jane Golly. You personally know Jane, right? Yeah, I've never met her, but we've
in person, but I was about to meet her before her demise and before the China in the world of the ANU was virtually collapsed forcibly. I've been informed that all the grants that they'd pre-approved were cancelled. I tried to go to China in the world because ANU was the leading university in Australia, but they were all too afraid to speak to me. Jane was she was suffering from stress and she wasn't even able to have a cup of coffee with me. I tried to make an appointment with other academics, but they were having a conference on the actual academic freedom of speech and what had happened to them. And so
they were having a conference on academic freedom of speech. Do you know the result of that conference? What was the takeaway from it?
No, it's all very silent and nobody's explaining.
So in other words, no freedom of speech.
There is no freedom of speech. If you're going to speak against the narrative of the government of the day, you'll be silenced. And if you're paid by the government, you'll soon find your salary will be affected. So my experience is that there isn't academic freedom of speech when it is contrary to the government and the government is funding it.
Yeah, I find this is an incredible situation. One of the things as a result, let's go back to the very beginning of our conversation where I asked you, and we now have 150 viewers, so we're up there with the numbers, and there was only about 17 when I asked this question, how well do we know each other? Will Glasgow of the Australian newspaper contacted me directly to find out the answer to these two questions. One, how well do I know you and have I met you? And two, am I traveling to Xinjiang with you? Now, the answer to question one has been answered. You and I have met online. We've never met in person. We didn't know each other until about 2 years ago. Would that be about right? Okay, yeah. About 2 years ago. And Robert, I met you later after Maureen got suspended. You came on in her defense. And
yes,
I commend you for that. Yeah, I commend you for that, coming on to defend your wife. What a great guy. And then we started talking about Xinjiang, and I told you my experiences. Now, the second question, am I going to Xinjiang with you, was raised because, was it the Sydney Morning or news.com.au?
News Corp, yeah.
Yeah.
News Corp.
Should we name the journalist who lied?
Well, there are so many lies, I'm afraid, with some of the Western mainstream media.
Okay, the journalist shall remain nameless.
Anyone.
You gave an interview to a journalist who then wrote that you and I planned to travel to Xinjiang together.
It's a total fabrication, as you know it and I know it, and I was surprised when I read it.
So was I.
Neither of us knew about it, but there must have been some political reason why we should be linked tightly. I don't know why, but there must have been some reason behind it to fabricate it.
Yeah. Someone says, expose the journalist that lied. The thing about doing this.
Which one?
Good question. The specific lie that I'm talking about is that you apparently said to a journalist, or he said that you said, you and I were traveling to Xinjiang together. When this came out, my wife said to me, you should contact Maureen. You should tell her that you didn't say this. You didn't agree to this. I said, and I was quite angry about it, to be honest. And then I suddenly realized something. I've got a brain in here, and it's quite a critical brain. I suddenly realized something. Wait a minute. Everything that I read in Western media about China is wrong. Why should I be angry with Maureen for something Western media says she said about me? Because Western media is always wrong about China. I've always found that every story has 2% of truth, and then the rest is misinterpretation, misunderstanding, and usually misinformation. Sometimes it's just outright lies, depending on who did it. And I won't name the BBC or the ABC journalists who do that all the time. They lie about China. And both of them have blocked me on Twitter because I call them out for their lies. So I won't name them. But it's a fact that journalists tell lies. Now, here's the thing. When Will Glasgow of the Australian, the only national Australian branded paper, contacted me and said, would you answer these two questions? I said, only on a live stream. And he said, it's not worth it just for two questions. I said, but I have questions for you. No reply. He does not want to talk to me in China, but he will misquote you about me, and he will possibly, I don't know, Will may be a very honest guy and he may not misquote me, but I'm not giving him the opportunity to misquote me. And I've said this now, I will happily, and I'll say this now live on this live stream, I will quite happily go one-on-one with any person who wants to discuss Xinjiang with me. Anyone. Adrian Zenz, if he wants to, no problem. I'll go one-on-one. Mike Pompeo, I'll go one-on-one. I'm quite happy to do that because I have the experience, I have the knowledge, and I have been there. Now, there's the difference between me and most of them. They haven't been there. They're quoting Adrian Zenz, who also hasn't been there. They're quoting ASPI, who also haven't been there. They're quoting witnesses who have been there, but left with their passports and their visas and no problem getting out of the country. There's the issue. What's the motivation for them to stay in America or to be in America and not come back? So that's why I'm prepared to go one-on-one. But not one Western media journalist wants to do that. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know Will Glasgow. I haven't heard of him. I can't really say much about him other than he's called me a spoof. That was a new one. A spoof, yeah, which is really a person that's deceptive. And I think that I don't take any notice of any of that. But it's not good to build rapport with these funny names of insults. And I'm so used to being insulting now that I think, well, especially from the Western mainstream media, I think, oh, let them go. Let them.
Do you have a favorite insult?
Oh, I love the one where they said I'm the most sophisticated Chinese propagandist that's being paid for. You know, that
you
they've
probably
really
are.
done a lot of work on me
Right.
to have the situation where I've got a 12-year-old child, where I've got all these different things, and I must be a spoof. I must be something deceptive. The fact is, we're very unusual. My husband and I'd say, are very eccentric.
Very.
And we've done many things. We've visited many countries that have been at war.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of traveling. So we're very unusual, but we're genuine.
Yeah. Good. It's great that you are planning to come here. What surprised me most of all when you tweeted that you were coming here was the response. The response that said, you know, you're a paid shill and you're all these different names, and you know, you a tool of the CCP propaganda, all that stuff. This was the response when you said, I want to find out what's the truth. It seems to me that they don't want the truth, because if you came over here and then proved that what Adrian Zenz says was right, or that ASPI are correct and the coordinates they gave you really are prisons, then that would hold you in a very high esteem. You're an academic who's come here and proven academically. But if there's nothing to prove, then the only thing that would cause them to be so nasty to you and call you these names is that they know that you're going to find something that they don't want you to find. That's my view.
It could be, but I have to wait to see.
Yeah.
At this stage, I don't have a view, or you know, I mean, I've got some views and prima facie evidence, but I can't say anything till I've done my field research.
No, of course not. Yeah, of
And
course not.
that's,
And I only have my own experience. I didn't go there with a view to researching. I just traveled through the region and talked to people and ate in their restaurants, and you know, sometimes went into their houses. I've actually had dinner in a Uyghur house, a lunch rather, not a dinner, in a Uyghur house. Jenny puts up this, Jenny O'Hara says, I want to know how to apply to be a CCP shill. And I would say, Jenny, you're doing everything right now by being positive about China. That's all you need to do. You'll get called that name, I promise you. Just go on Twitter and tell people you think that China's a great place. So we've gone over our hour now. Is there anything that you would like to add? Oh, not this one. Good luck. This one. I just click the button as it moves. Patrick, I'm sorry. You don't get paid. If they did, I'd be a rich man. These would be real guitars on the wall instead of Epiphone copies. So no, you don't get paid to be a shill. Sorry about that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we wind up?
I'd like to thank all the Chinese people that have supported me through this. When I have been attacked by the Western media or you know, trolls, they've come forward to protect me, to support me, to invite me, and it's been a wonderful experience to have that. They've supported me through this, and I'd like to thank all of them. And they're the people that work for the CPC and the people that live in China and live in Xinjiang. I'd like to thank them.
Okay. Now, where can they find you if people want to follow you on Twitter?
Well, on my Twitter handle, Maureen Huebel, at Maureen Huebel.
No, just
Maureen
to be correct,
there's an A in the middle there, yes?
Yes, yeah. That's right. There is a Maureen Huebel that's not Maureen.
Yes,
it's Maureen,
that's right.
A. Huebel. And
it's Heubel?
No, the other way around. H-U-E.
I knew I'd get that one wrong. I'm dyslexic. I do H-U-E-B-E-L.
Right. When I come to publish my methodology of what I'm going to do, I really would like people, from whether they agree with me or disagree with me, all the ones that have insulted me, I'm happy to hear from them. Please contribute to my published methodology so that I can have something that is accepted on an international basis as being a method of ascertaining exactly what's going on in Xinjiang, in particular, this amazing poverty alleviation program.
Yeah, it is.
We have a lot to learn. We have a lot to learn.
And we think about Xinjiang, but the whole of China. My wife and I cycled through Guangxi a couple of years ago, and we were there in 2005, absolute poverty, and we cycled through again just in 2021. It's a completely, there's still poor people, of course, but it's a completely different world. Gansu and Ningxia, absolute devastating poverty in those regions. Back in 2016, the first time I went through there. In 2014, the first time I went through. 2019, when I came back again, there's no visible signs of what we saw before. You know, the bark huts are all gone, and there's multi-stories and there's cars. There was no cars. People were traveling around with donkeys and things like that. So it has changed. So Xinjiang is not the only place, but I would strongly suggest on your way to Xinjiang, catch the train and get off a couple of times, and then you'll see the population.
And I'm also planning to take our daughter. She wants to go on an Australian train, and then she wants to go on a Chinese train. So she'll be able to she some of our trains are very old, and sometimes we have to go to Sydney to get to Canberra. So she can see
that's actually not a bad idea. Ask her to take a video. If she's videos a few things and she wants to make a video, I have a couple of friends who do editing. They'd be very happy to do this. It would be a free service. They edit for me for free. One day I am going to monetize my YouTube channel. I haven't yet, but one day I will. And when I do, it will be to benefit those guys who are helping me to do the editing, because I don't want to edit, too much trouble. But yeah, if your daughter does that, it's Marianne, right?
Yeah, Marianne.
Yeah. If she does that, then if you want it edited, save it all up, put it on a disc, and I'll give it to my editors, and we'll get something back that would be nice. And then you could do a voiceover. She could do a voiceover on it as well, a commentary.
Yeah, she's seen the trains on TikTok, and she wants to know why our trains aren't the same.
There's one major factor, and that is return on investment. In a capitalist society, they must have a return on investment. If you're going to put a train line in there, it has to break even within 3 years or 5 years or whatever. China just says, well, it doesn't matter what the return on investment is. What's the benefit to the people who are going to get there? Then they say the train might lose money. It doesn't matter if the train loses money. What's important is that the city or the town at the other end of it earns more money. So the investment is much broader, or the return is a much broader return. It's not just, does this train line make money? It doesn't matter. Does that city contribute to the country's tax coffers now when it didn't before? That's what's more important. So China is investing in itself as opposed to investing in its military or its banking or its real estate. It invests in infrastructure that causes people to come out of poverty. When people come out of poverty, they become long-term taxpayers, which they weren't before. Subsistence farmers pay no tax. Tourist operators pay tax. So some of those subsistence farms, so for example, if you know about the rice terraces up the mountain, they were subsistence farms. Now the farmers are not farmers anymore. They still are, but they're curators of a living museum. They're tourist operators. They're hotels and coffee shops and bed and breakfasts and all kinds of things. And you can buy stuff from there. You can even buy rice if you want from those fields. That's the difference. Now, those people are now earning money and they're paying tax. The train line's not making money, but the town at the end of it is. That's the important thing. And Australia doesn't think like that. This is a good story. And I know this is true. A village girl from Guangxi became the captain of a destroyer in the Navy. There's also one from Xinjiang, a local village girl a Uyghur, who is now a senior officer in the Navy. Of course, the Navy is huge and there might only be one or two, but we get to hear about them. So they also, in a sense, they're a propaganda. They're a token gesture in some respects. But I don't want to take anything away from this girl. She's the captain of a destroyer. She has to have the smarts. the fact that we know about it means that the government knows that they've got this smart girl. Let's put her in this position and let's make a documentary about what she did to get there. And that does happen. So,
all right, I'd like to thank you, Jerry. Thanks for having us on.
No need to thank me. I want to thank you because I wanted to get this issue sorted out. I am very much looking forward to when you come over here having a gin and tonic or a glass of wine or something with you both, and finally getting to shake the hands and meet you, because you've done so much for China without ever having the evidence to prove what you say. I mean, I say things about China, but I live here. You are trusting what you're seeing and supporting China.
I work
and I
out
appreciate
who I can trust. I work out who I can trust before I take it on board. I don't listen to it all. And I trust you. I trust you. I trust that you're an honest man, and so I do listen to what you have to say.
Thank
and your
you.
experience in Xinjiang.
Yeah, experience counts for everything. I do plan to go there again. I planned this year, but I've now got commitments taking me out to August, so I won't go there before August. But I did plan to go to Xinjiang again this year, and with a different view. When I went there before, I had no idea of the political ramifications of where I would end up. I was there before I was on Twitter, and I didn't even think that I would ever be the person I am now defending this country. I had this hit me completely by surprise. I'm just a normal guy who happens to have a different experience. So yeah, I'm looking forward to you coming over here, and it's quite possible we could be in Xinjiang at the same time. It's quite possible we could even travel together. I don't know yet, but we haven't planned that. So the news.com.au did lie about that. It's not the only thing they've lied about, but there's one that we can prove. So thank you for helping me to prove that the Murdoch press, the Australian press, do tell lies. And by the way, my favorite insult, I'm the bike riding bozo. I remember that one. That was Stephen McDonald from the BBC just before he blocked me. I won't be called a liar by a bike riding bozo. There you go. That's the BBC. Okay. So I wanted to thank, we now have nearly 150 viewers. Steve Weaver. Steve said to say hi to you here. I think, great discussion, and looking forward to seeing more of you, Maureen and Robert. Steve is in the UK. He's an ex-military guy. He and I have had a chat online like this, and a great guy, really good guy, very positive about everything, actually. He's not just positive about China. He's a very positive guy. Thank you, Steve, for watching.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jerry.
All right.
Thank you very much. And there's one last one I'm going to show you here. Good luck with your Xinjiang region adventures.
Oh, thank you, Kevin.
Thank
you, Kevin.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to now end the broadcast and say good night to everyone who's in Australia. Good morning to everyone who's in America, and good evening to everyone here in China. Good morning to the UK too. So thank you very much, everyone.
Goodbye for now.
Bye.